and welcome to Carers Talk, the podcast for carers, where we share advice, information and carers' experiences. My name's Michelle and I'm your host, and this podcast is brought to you by Carers Trust Solihull. We hope you enjoy. Hello and welcome to Carers Talk podcast. On this episode, we are going to be talking to Sajida Golby, who is a parent carer. Hello Sajida, how are you?
Hello Michelle, I'm fine, thank you.
Now, Sajida, you have been registered with the Carers Trust and been a parent carer now for over a decade. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Of course. So, my name is Sajida Golby, and first and foremost, I'm a parent carer of three wonderful children, all with special needs. They are all autistic and also have health needs. I also run an amazing support group called North Solihull Additional Needs Support Group, which covers the whole of Solihull and outskirts. So I have several hats on.
Very busy woman.
A very busy woman.
Okay, so Sajida, when we talk about carers are often invisible because they don't see themselves as carers. I find we see that actually with parent carers, this can be even more tricky because they obviously first see themselves as parents. I suppose it's difficult for parent carers to actually, when they cross that line of actually, I'll maybe probably do more than a parent with regard to care needs and things like that. Was there a moment when you thought, actually, you know, I am a parent carer?
That's a really good question. And I think you nailed it. I still struggle with that. I see myself first as a parent. And I think it's only when I start having my carers assessments, the penny dropped that I was also a carer. Because as a parent, your role is to care for your children. Of
course it is, yeah.
To keep them safe, to feed them, to make sure they're independent as possible, to nurture them. And it's what parents do. And it's only when you sit down and do your carers assessment that you realise actually you go over and beyond that, and you're an occupational therapist, you're a physiotherapist, you're a speech and language therapist, you're a secretary, you're everything apart from yourself, and you start losing your own identity. And I think that's when it dawns on you, actually, I am a carer because I do all these other roles which another parent potentially wouldn't have to because they haven't got a child with additional needs or health needs. Because usually when they get to a certain age, they're independent, they can catch a bus or they can walk to school. And my eldest is now 15, he's going to be 16 this year. And we still have to drive him to school. As we are speaking on this podcast at the moment, my husband is sitting outside the school while he does his couple of lessons and drive him back because he struggles with his anxiety. He's neurodiverse and he also has health needs. So it's not something that you envision to be doing as a parent.
No.
But you kind of just get on with it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think another reason why parent carers are often so invisible because it's a part of life, isn't it? If it's from when they're very small, it becomes life. So you mentioned that you had a carers assessment. How did that come about? I mean, obviously someone thought, Sajida is a carer in a caring role. Was that social services?
So my eldest was diagnosed at 3.
Is that with autism?
With autism. And even then, I didn't see myself as a carer because a child at 3 still requires a lot of support and help.
Yeah.
Even though we were having a lot of medical appointments because he also has health needs. I didn't know anything different. It's just norm. So I still didn't see myself as a carer. I think as he got older and more professionals got involved and the word was bandied around, and then I was referred to Solihull Carers.
Us, yeah.
Yes, yourselves, your good selves. And the assessment process start taking place. And you have to highlight what you do every single day. And it's only when you sit down and list all the activities you have to do, for example, the physiotherapy and the OT, the sensory integration, the medication, the running around, hospital appointments, and making sure you're at the right hospital appointment at the right time, especially when you've got 3 children with neurodiversities and health needs.
It's a full-time job in itself now.
It is.
I actually know, I've known you for a long time, and you are never not busy. You are always running, and of course you run the North Solihull group as well. But even in your personal life with the children, it's like a full-time job for yourself, isn't it?
It is, and the sad thing is, it's I love my children,
of course,
but you do lose your identity, and it's quite isolating, and I think a lot of carers do feel isolated, and their mental health then declines, and I have health needs myself. So if you've got existing health needs, they are impacted and become worse because you become secondary to everything.
Yeah.
Your first and foremost job is to make sure that your caring role it takes a priority, and you kind of become second. You don't neglect yourself on purpose. It's just organically it happens.
Yeah.
2 weeks ago, I was in hospital for a week, for example.
Yeah.
You would never have guessed that we wear this mask, and I think we've got a duty as carers to highlight to everyone, actually, we do need help. We need support, because when the mask does come off, or when you do become poorly, that's when you realise actually the saying where you've got to put your own mask on first is so essential. Because I was in a hospital bed with IV and medication and in so much agony, and I still was a carer. I still had to make sure certain things were done, and that's when it hits you, like, you have to really look after yourself, and that was the best thing you can do as a carer, to put to look after your own emotional and well-being needs as well.
It is, isn't it? And I think as a parent, it's natural that you put your children first, but even when there's a caring role, I imagine that line gets blurry even more, and that would be hard to differentiate. But I completely agree, and in this line of work we see so many carers who put the needs of the person they care for first, and often it detrimental to their own health.
Yeah.
But what about, you've been caring for a long time now. What are some of the challenges that you find that have been the hardest, especially within your parent carer role?
I think what makes life difficult for us carers is, I don't think it's the caring role itself, because it becomes part of you. I think it's the support that the person you're caring for requires. So if they get the right support at the right time, whether that's health or education or social, it makes your caring role so much easier. And actually, as a society, you will save money, so to speak.
Definitely.
Because that intervention is there. We want our children, young people, young adults to be as independent as possible. So if the early intervention is there, the right help at the right time for the person you're caring for, it means that us as carers will have more time for ourselves as well, to look after our emotional health. We're unpaid carers. So actually, if someone else was coming in and caring for the child or the adult, that would cost the society a lot more money.
Billions, yeah.
Absolute billions. So it's so important that if that early help is given to the child or the adult, it puts less strain on us as carers. It also put less strain on the social and the NHS system, because nationally, statistically, if you're a carer, you're more likely to have mental health issues. You're more likely to have a lot more health issues in general.
Yeah.
Because you kind of leave it to the last minute.
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
Like in my situation, I was in hospital for a week, because you think, I'll get over it. It's something more important. But it just goes back to early intervention, right help at the right time for the person you're caring for. And I think that will make our roles as carers a lot more easier.
I completely agree. And I think a lot of, in my experience working with some parent carers, is that they always seem to be fighting for their children in one sense or another, especially within education. to meet their child's needs. And have you had experience of that?
Yes, it's been a rough 2 years, I have to say. In them 2 years, I've had 2 children at home. So my youngest was at home for 8-9 months. He now, thankfully, is in the right setting and blossoming, and that's what we want.
Yeah, of course.
That's every child is entitled to an education. It's their human rights. Just because a child has neurodiversity or health needs, why should they not have the same access to support socially, educationally, NHS as another person who hasn't? It's equality, inequity. It's all that. I now have a child who has been struggling for the past 4 years, and we continuously fought for him to have the right help.
Is that within a school setting?
School, health, mental health. School impacts their mental health, and they regress. And you have autism regression, you have mental health regression. If the environment isn't right, it leads to a child ending up with mental health conditions, and their health conditions being exacerbated. And he was put on a part-time timetable. That didn't work. And he's now at home and medically signed off, with zero support, it feels sometimes. Because while we now have a nice team around us who are helping him with his mental health, trying to get the right help available for him educationally, the right setting. It's taken 4 years, 4 years of fighting.
And when you say fighting, is that the to get him assessed, or?
No, he was diagnosed really young. Once again, all my children were diagnosed really young. And he has struggled all his life because he also has a learning difficulty. He has selective mutism, autism. He has a concoction of diagnoses, which makes him complex in the world of education and NHS. And I don't really like the word complex. I say, what does that mean?
Yeah, what is normal?
What is normal? What do you mean by complex? He's, he still has the same entitlements as anyone else. So he has been failed from a very young age, sadly. And, we tried mainstream and it didn't work. And we tried one special needs school and sadly that didn't work. And the conclusion is he needs something very small, very nurturing, that focuses on his mental well-being. And we've been through the processes of going to tribunals and winning them, LGOs and winning them. So it's not the case of, anything that we could do anymore. It was a case that statutory failures. And that's when I go back to early intervention. If the child or the adult is given the right help at the right time, the law is followed, the statutory duties are followed, reasonable adjustments, Equality Act. If everything is followed in law, majority of the families that we support and myself wouldn't be in the situation we are in now.
And it goes fundamentally back to what you said, that if the right support is put in place for the person you care for, that in itself has a massive positive impact on caring.
100%, because not only does a young person who's not accessing school becomes a prisoner in their own home, so does a carer.
Exactly. And also for carers who work, who have to give up their jobs because they have to stay at home, obviously, with their child. And also a lot of parent carers, there's a term of the sandwiched carer, because they often have parents that need their support as well. So they have it from one side of their parents, but also their children, and they're obviously, stuck in the middle. So that can be challenging as well.
Yeah. And that's what I think that term is what we are. So I look after, my mum needs full-time help. She has health needs, and obviously I'm also looking after my 3 children with Send, whilst battling my own. And it's a juggling act, but I genuinely believe it all goes back to statutory failures. If there was early intervention, the right help at the right time, I feel that it's not the caring role itself that impounds us, because it's the fighting, as we spoke about.
Yeah.
It's making sure they fulfill their potential. They are as independent as possible. They have access to everything else that any other child or adult is able to access. Like, you wouldn't say to a wheelchair user, I'm sorry, you can't enter this building because there's no ramp. You wouldn't say that. So why is it acceptable to say to a child who's neurodiverse, with mutism, learning difficulty, to say, well, you can't access education because you're too complex. It's taking us a lot longer to find you a suitable setting.
And the emotional side of that must be, for yourself, must be so hard to see your child be failed in that way.
Continuously, yes. I think it's really sad. We've become immune to it. I think that is the sad reality for a lot of carers. It becomes the norm.
Yeah.
And it's only when I sit with friends who are not carers, it dawns on me, actually, this isn't normal, whatever normal is. Because while they drop their kids off to school and able to sit down and have a coffee and go to work, as a carer, I've had to give up my job. And it was quite a successful job. I was doing really well. I was managing an office. I was in recruitment. And I had to give up my career. Even when I'm running the support group, a lot of things that I want to do and what I envisioned for it, I'm not able to do because my caring responsibilities are so huge. But on a positive, if I can give a little bit back to the community, I feel, I've given that little bit back of hope to families, to carers. If I can help a child access education or get into the right setting, it gives me a bit of fulfillment that I've helped another person. So,
if we can touch on your the group that you created, do you want to talk a little bit about that?
The North Solihull Additional Needs Group. Yes, of course. It's a baby. It's my baby. So when I moved into Solihull, it wasn't very diverse then.
Yeah.
And I just felt alone. I was Muslim. I was Asian of background. I had children who were neurodiverse, and I didn't know nothing about autism. So when my son was first diagnosed, it was a learning curve for me.
Yeah.
So not only was I dealing with neurodiversity, accepting a diagnosis alongside his health diagnosis, feeling really isolated and alone, not knowing where to turn. These big words being used, such as sensory integration, and
they weren't so known, were they, back in the day?
Yeah. I said, surely I'm not the only one who feels this alone. The inequality and inequity upset me a lot. There seemed to be a massive north and south divide, which in my head I couldn't understand. We all have the same blood running through our veins. So, I just don't understand it personally, which is why I'm really community focused. So I decided to set up a group from my conservatory, thinking maybe I'll get 1 or 2 parents if I'm lucky. But I think the first meeting in my conservatory, we had about 12. Bearing in mind, I didn't know any of them. I met some of them just through their child also having a diagnosis or online. So if you ask me now, would I met these people online and I invited them to my house. Please don't do this, kids, if you're listening. I'm not advocating that at all. But that's exactly what I did. And it just blossomed from there. And we've got about 1,800 families that we support across the borough now.
Is that with support groups? You have monthly support groups?
Yeah, we have. They're not happening as often at the moment because I've been quite poorly. But we have coffee mornings. We work alongside the local authority and NHS, so we provide feedback to them. I also am part of the police program where we provide feedback on how they can help the community, especially if they're dealing with children with special needs and what we're seeing. A lot of it is we deal with third-party organisations providing feedback on what is happening on the ground level, because there's such disparity. So their stats will show one thing, and their information, as in their research, will show one thing. And those who are going through it on a daily basis will, it's heartbreaking, because we're like, this is not factual.
Yeah.
This isn't, the disparity is huge, even in percentages with the figures they come out with. And
who's this, the like local authority, or?
It's NHS, it's education mainly, I would say.
Yeah.
Education, the amount of children, sadly, not in education is huge within Solihull. And yes, it has not been a choice for some families. They had no choice to, like myself, to remove our children, to keep them safe, and to make sure they were mentally well and mentally safe and didn't regress. Whilst it wasn't a choice, it was something we had to do for the safety and protection for the young person. Yes.
Mm.
And it's worked for some families, and we see so many children who are out of school who are flourishing, genuinely are flourishing, educationally, socially, emotionally. And we see these children firsthand. So we've seen them the group's been growing for 8 years now. So we've seen them from little young
I've seen
children.
babies at your group.
Yeah. And we see them grow up, and it's beautiful.
Yeah.
So we know the families, we know the parents, we know the grandparents. So it's a really community thing. So we can say this child has flourished because of X, Y, Z. Or we can say, actually this child, we can see ourselves because these children attend our, we have like respite sessions.
Mm-hmm.
We have picnic in the park. We do sensory Santa. So because we do community events as well, where it involves a whole family, we see if there's a regression in the child. And we can say, well, it seems to us the child has said they're struggling with bullying. It could be something else that needs to be identified and rectified. It could be because sensory overload, the class sizes have got bigger, they're not understanding their own bodies. A lot of our children don't understand emotions. They don't know what it feels like to be sad and why they're sad. And that's where the work is needed, because these young people will be adults and our caring responsibility will be even bigger.
It'll change.
It will change,
It will change, yeah. And what I noticed, from your group and how magic it is that you are all experts by your own experience, in that sense that you help each other because you've all kind of been through it. I mean, what would you say to maybe someone who has come into this new caring journey as a parent carer, or carers who may be struggling in that sense? What would you offer?
Find your tribe. You have to find your tribe. And whatever that group might be, whether it would be through us or another group, contact Solihull Carers, get your assessment done, understand yourself. You have to have self-worth. You have to believe that you are as important as anyone else, because you cannot fulfill your caring responsibility if you're poorly. And that can be physically, emotionally, mentally. So it's so important to make sure your own anchor is there. You're stable yourself, because then you will give the person you're caring for, whether that's a child or an adult, the best you can. But if you're not looking after your own well-being, and I think mental health has been the biggest that we've seen that's causing the biggest of issues at the moment with parents and carers, and myself. I was diagnosed with trauma, and even myself, I think it's not helpful that we wear this mask and we don't talk about it, because that person who might be struggling with their mental health and may have trauma or anxiety or depression might not want to talk about it because they feel ashamed and very isolated. And a lot of the reasons they don't talk about it is because they do feel as it's just them in this dark world, and it compounds them, and it compounds their physical and mental well-being. So I feel as if I'm bearing all at the moment.
No.
But I think it's important that, we show our vulnerabilities, and especially someone like myself who runs a group, to say, even though it's really hard to say, I also struggle mentally. I've had to ask for help and get that help. And, I have been diagnosed with trauma, so I do really get it. But I also understand how important it is that we talk about it because suicide rates are higher. People becoming impatient, whether that's young or older, are higher.
And
Nationally.
And, things like safeguarding, people being pushed to their absolute limit in caring roles and having that, like you say, that trauma and all of the responses that come with that. It is a very important topic. And I think with your group, if a carer was to come to your group feeling that way, they would get met with that kind of open arms and, not to be afraid to discuss these things. Because, when I've been in your group, a lot of the members that I've found are freely and openly speak about actually how they're feeling.
Yeah.
And it's not all, I think there's this idea that carers are meant to love their caring role and, and obviously love their children, which I know you all do. But sometimes it's hard and you don't feel positive about your caring role, and some days you just want to hide and not see your children or the person you care for. And I think that's normal.
Mm-hmm.
And I think your group lets people know that.
Yeah. It's talking about the taboo subjects and normalizing it. And the first thing they talk about when it comes to mental health is acknowledging it, accepting it, owning it. We have seen the vulnerability of parents because we've shown our own vulnerabilities, and that safe space is needed without feeling you're going to be judged as a carer or as a parent, gaslighted. That's huge, happening at the moment, sadly, because parents do feel gaslighted. I felt gaslighted, and when they see someone who's a lot further in their journey and saying, actually, it's happened to me, it's acceptable, but it makes them feel like, oh, it's not just me.
Yeah.
And I think for me, that's really important, because if we had this conversation back in December, I was in a very dark place and I felt really alone. I felt isolated. I didn't know where to turn. I had a child at home who was regressing. He was let down horrendously by services. He ended up with a new diagnosis of depression at age 13.
Gosh.
And I wasn't angry at my caring role and what had that impacted me. I was angry at how he has been let down and failed and the injustice of that. And he has the same rights as anyone else, and the impact he had in our family. As a result, my caring role and my partner's caring role increased tenfold, as did our lifestyle change because of those failures. And I think if anything can be taken away, if professionals are listening, is please support these young people, these young adults, because they are tomorrow's future, and it makes our role easier, because for a parent to accept eventually they are also a carer, it's hard. It really is hard. And for a parent to have these carers assessment where they reveal all, but then they want the help, because imagine revealing all and your vulnerabilities and then being left with, so where do we go from here? So it's that signposting is so important, which Solihull carers do really well. It's that little bit of respite that's really important. That bit of, I'm going to sit down and have a coffee in peace for 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Or have a shower. Without being, it's them little things that people take for granted as carers are so important to us. But we do wear this mask, and I think we as carers should show our vulnerabilities and highlight that it's hard, and we should talk about it more openly. So maybe more help will come through via the government, maybe, because it's needed.
It definitely is. And I think, like I say about that fighting spirit that I see in a lot of parent carers who fiercely every day are fighting for their children and their rights and for their needs to be met. And I think that in itself is tiring. You can only do that for so long without, like yourself, burnout and not being in the best place, with your well-being yourself.
Yeah.
So that is really important. if there was any parent carers listening with regard to your support group that you run, which I'd highly recommend, how would they, I know you've got a really good Facebook group. Is that the best way to get in contact?
Yes, we're a voluntary organisation, so we don't get money or paid for anything we do. It's all on a voluntary basis. So we've got a Facebook page. There's a public one for professionals to see and parents just to get general advice and information. So if there's happening anything with the NHS or there's an issue with medication at the moment, for example, ADHD, that is all highlighted on the public page. But then there's a private group which offers families, parents, a safe space to talk about anything and everything without being judged or reprimanded for what they might be thinking. Because everyone has days on says, I want to kill my child. They don't actually mean it.
Of course not.
But, and it's that, one of the things I say, we need to get rid of that stereotype that social services are there to take your children away. And only social services can do that. They need to remove that stereotype because people are actually scared. Parents and families are scared to ask for help.
Of social services. And actually, they are there to support you.
Yeah, they're supposed to be there to support you and provide that early intervention and, help with respite. And that can only happen and I hope one day that things do change where social services change that narrative that they are seen as the people who take children away. Yes, they've got that role to safeguard every child, adult, etc. But there is a disability social work team which is and should be designed for early intervention, ensuring the child can be as independent, respite, much needed respite. And what they need to do is work with charity organisations like ours, not-for-profit, etc., and find out how everyone can work together so that taboo is removed. So parents, yes, they can come for us and we signpost them and we can guide them, but we can't provide them that desperate respite they need. And only social services can do that. And we need to bridge that gap.
Yeah.
So they go to them to get that support. We've been quite fortunate that we've been working with yourselves and providing respite in the sense of,
our relaxation
days. And they're always busy and they've been amazing. And we work with other organisations like SENDIAS where we provide free legal support. Everything is free basically, unless, we have to pay for someone specialist to come in and then there's a couple of £2 charge.
Which, is incredible.
Yeah, we recently we had someone called Michael Charles, who is a renowned solicitor, who came and I think it was like 90 tickets sold.
Wow.
And it just shows how much it's needed.
100%. It really is.
It was an evening event and I thought, I don't know how this is going to work because a lot of families struggle. But for 90 people to attend, they were all parent carers, shows how desperately they want this information.
And it is, if you're not in the world of, caring or supporting someone, there's a lot of lingo, especially with children and the education system. There's a lot of lingo that if you don't know and what to ask for and all that kind of thing. And I think giving and equipping carers, especially parent carers, with that information is powerful and is needed.
It is, and this lingo is still used. Jargon needs to be removed completely, I think. I think it causes such barriers with accessing support, understanding your child, understanding the diagnosis, even within mental health. Mental health is crippling. And our children are struggling with mental health conditions and they use these big words in NHS letters, whether that's the paediatrician or education or whoever it may be. But why do they use this jargon? It's not helpful to us as the carer. What they need to do is make it readable and understandable that one day the child who's got this diagnosis can understand it. So it equips them as well. I still get now in my letters and I'm reading it and I'm like, I don't know what this means. And I'm Googling it away or asking other parents. But imagine if you can't speak English.
Yeah.
Or English is not your first language, or you're from a community that's completely isolated. So we have We support the Somalian community and the Muslim community, who there might be parts of it where English is not their first language, so we help them interpret letters and stuff. We're supposed to be living in an inclusive society. While this word is bandied around so easily, ask us, do you feel included? Do our kids ask our kids? And if they say no, you're not inclusive. If you ask me now, as someone who's Asian, is the society in Solihull inclusive? I would say no. Because if there was, why am I still getting families coming to me, asking me to read their letters, or not understanding the process of trying to get early intervention?
And I think as well, culturally, when we say caring, it's very different in different cultures.
Yes.
Expectations, and all of that. So that's something to be aware of, isn't it?
So when I was growing up, in the Asian community, it's quite normal for your grandparents to live with you. So you kind of become a carer without you realizing it from a very young age.
Yeah.
So my mum always was poorly, so I was looking after my mum as well. My grandparents, when they moved in, I was an interpreter because obviously English was not their first language with my grandparents. And I used to take them to the appointments, and I used to take my mum. I still do. So it's kind of, I grew up not knowing I was like a young carer.
Yeah.
In fact, and that happens even today. There's so many people who are carers, even young carers, who don't actually know or wouldn't even know where to go to or consider they were young carers. And I think this is why it's so important that even in special schools and mainstream schools, that it's discussed more, because I think it's 1 in 5. I think the stats I read.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah. It's probably more than that.
It wouldn't shock me that there's a young carer, and that also includes special schools. Just because they attend a special school and they might be neurodiverse, they might be looking after their siblings. So my eldest, he's 15. He has his own needs, but when I look into it, he's also seen as a young carer. But he wouldn't acknowledge that himself, or we wouldn't know that unless I was from this kind of background.
Yeah.
I think awareness is so important, because what we're doing is that stigma, and all we're doing is we're going to have a generation of people feeling the way I feel, unless we squash that kind of gap somehow.
Yeah. And I think the work you're doing is incredible. And I know you have a team as well, don't you, that help you, of volunteers. And I think, the work you're doing to support parent carers is brilliant. And like I say, any parents that are in the north or around, because I know you've spread out now.
Yeah. It's always it was called north because that's where I'm from, and it is one of the most deprived areas in Solihull, and we do have a lot of families who struggle. But actually, there's also deprivation in South that people don't know about, and they don't assume. And actually, we have got parents in the South who also need food banks and need help and support. So it's a lot of once again taboo. You assume someone lives in the South and they're rich. Actually, it's not the case.
No.
Whether you live in the North, whether you live in the South, it doesn't make a difference. If someone needs support, they need support.
Yeah. And circumstances, can affect everyone, especially in a caring role.
I think the financial implication is huge, with cost of living and stuff. Parents are having to pay privately because they can't get to the right support for their children mentally, for example. Mental health is in crisis. Trying to get help for a young child with autism who might be going through depression or severe anxiety or self-harming, it's really hard. And it's not CAM's fault, because they haven't got the staff. It's trying to recruit the staff, get the funding. It's no one's fault. It's more of a government issue, I think. I think more money is needed. I think anyone who works in the service does it wholeheartedly and wants to try their best.
Yeah.
But they've got constraints. I think I know everyone needs standards of, we will accept you if you meet this criteria. But sometimes when you've got neurodivergent children, they're never going to fit in that box.
No.
That's why they're neurodivergent. And because they don't fit in the box, their mental health is impacted. They become school refusers and so forth. They start self-harming. They slip through the net. And as a carer, all that happens is we're fighting the system to try to give them that little bit of help and, find that one person that would help them just to make our roles easier. Most importantly, to get that help for the young person.
Yeah. Well, Sajida, was there anything else that you feel, within this space, this episode, about parent carers that you would like to share or bring up, or anything that you would like to say to any other parent carers or professionals? Just put you on the spot.
I know, you really have. To parent carers, I would like to say, if you feel alone, if you feel isolated, it's not a feeling that it's only you experiencing it, because others do experience it and feel it. The isolation, the loneliness. And if you speak to any carer, I think that's some of the words they may potentially use. I know it's words that we hear commonly and words that I would personally use. Find your tribe, find your support, contact Solihull Carers, or if you're in another county, Birmingham or wherever, please contact them, because they're designed to help and support you. Carers assessment, get them done. I think, I'm the world's worst because I put myself second and I'm due one soon.
Yeah.
So I'm great at giving advice, but I'm really bad at taking it. But these carer assessments are amazing. They really are, because they will make you realise, actually, it's not all in your head. First of all, you are doing over and beyond.
Yeah.
Actually, if they can signpost you to make your role that little bit easier, take the advice. And to professionals, I want to say, it's not the caring role that's hard. Being a carer, I don't find hard. It's fighting the system, whether that's education, usually it's education, whether that's education or health or mental health at the moment, which is hard for a lot of our families. Early intervention, again, right help, right time. Teenagers, there's a lot of emphasis on the early years. And I feel as if the older children, like 15-year-olds, 13-year-olds, I feel as if they're not getting the right support or help, because the focus seems to be on early years, which is positive. What about those who are already in the system and been failed?
And it's complex as they get older, and they're, dealing with their own puberty and social, networks and things like that. And as they transition into that adult phase, it's hard.
It is. Please don't forget them, I would say. They matter as well. They want to be independent as possible. Let's have that I can attitude rather than I can't. If you're in the professional field, think to yourself what oath you've taken. You've taken an oath to help, i.e. if you're a doctor or a psychiatrist or psychologist. And that's all these young people want. And for social services, and other professionals, gaslighting all they will do is cause more barriers. Work with us, work with families, work with organisations like ours who provide the service for free. And you won't always get everything from a brochure or a leaflet or statistics. If your statistics don't marry up to what's happening on the ground level, there's an issue.
Yeah, it's important, because I think that will put people off as well, accessing support, if they don't feel what's been said is right.
I think a lot of it is parents have become not scared. I think they're just fed up, and it gets to the point of thinking, what is the point? Is it going to change? I think the word is apathy. If that can be changed, hope can be given again. Just listen. I think listening to the young person's voice and listening to all communities, not just a selective. If you're sitting in a room and you don't see diversity, you should be questioning why. Because the amount of rooms I sit in so many meetings, I feel as if I'm the only Asian one, that's question. Why? We need more young people. We need more diverse voices. We need to hear how it impacts them as well, because the level of inequality, inequity is just getting, and it's nationally, it's proven. So it's not something I'm saying that, it's not proven. It is getting worse. So, we need to hear from everyone, not a select. positive stories as well.
Oh, of course,
positive
yeah,
stories as
yeah.
well.
It's all part of the conversation, and I think it's all part of, it's all valid. It really is. Carers Trust Solihull, we do parent carer support. We have a great team that support parent carers and do parent carers assessments. I will put everything from our details about how parent carers can get support in the show notes, and I'll also put some links to the Facebook groups that you work with as well.
Thank you.
And any other information. But thank you so much, Sajida. It's been great chatting, and I think the work you do is incredible, and the work your team do. And thank you very much.
Thank you very much.